What if everything you were taught about masculinity is a lie? Think about it. Today you're bombarded with two loud voices. One tells you that masculinity is toxic, dangerous, something that must be suppressed. The other insists it's about dominance, money, and status. Walk like this, talk like this, act tough, hide your emotions. Both sides screaming, both sides certain. But what if they're both wrong? Here's the truth. What most of us are being sold is just pretend masculinity. It's a costume. It's posturing. Gurus will teach you to puff your chest, fake confidence, and hide vulnerability. But that's not manhood. That's theater. Real masculinity isn't about pretending. It's about responsibility. It's about carrying weight that isn't easy, but necessary. And strangely enough, J.R.R. Tolkien gave us a hidden blueprint for this in one of the most unforgettable characters ever written, Aragorn. Because when you strip away the swords and the crown, Aragorn shows us a version of masculinity that feels almost radical today. Not toxic, not performative, but real. So let's clear the fog. When people talk about masculinity today, the picture usually falls into two extremes. On one side, masculinity is painted as aggression, dominance, and wealth at all costs. The alpha stereotype. It turns men into narcissistic takers, loud, prideful, obsessed with being on top, but blind to the responsibility that comes with strength. On the other side, you're told masculinity means passivity. Be soft, reject ambition, tame your instincts. In this view, strength itself is a danger to be clipped, wings cut before they even learn to fly. But both of these are distortions. Both leave men hollow. And here's the danger. Without authentic masculinity, any society, past or present, begins to rot. Families weaken, communities lose their backbone. That's why Aragorn matters so much. Because his version of masculinity isn't brute force, and it isn't weakness. It's something far greater, something rooted in responsibility, humility, and sacrifice. And it's something we are badly missing in men today. Aragorn was born into royalty. By blood, he was the heir of Isildur, destined for the throne of Gondor. Most men in his position would have claimed that title the moment they came of age. Who wouldn't want the crown, the power, the legacy? But Aragorn did the opposite. He turned away from luxury, from recognition, and chose a life of wandering hardship. For decades, he roamed Middle-earth as a ranger, nameless, faceless to most, protecting people who never even knew his name. Why? Because Aragorn wasn't chasing glory. He was chasing responsibility. He was shaping himself into the man the world would one day need, not the man he felt entitled to be. That's where humility comes in. Humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means refusing to make life all about yourself. Aragorn had every reason to demand respect, but time and again, he put the mission above his ego. Take the Council of Elrond. The future of Middle-earth hangs in the balance. Boromir, proud son of Gondor, mocks Aragorn as just a ranger, unworthy of raising his voice among lords and warriors. A lesser man would have erupted, shouting his lineage, demanding recognition, forcing others to see his worth. But Aragorn stays silent. He doesn't defend himself. He lets Legolas reveal who he really is, heir to the throne of Gondor. That's not weakness, that's strength under control. And this is the first lesson. Letting go of the ego is the foundation of true masculinity, because when you're obsessed with proving yourself, you've already lost. Aragorn wasn't concerned with being seen as a king. He was concerned with being ready to act like one when the time came. Look at how this plays out in battle. At Weathertop, when Frodo is stabbed by the Nazgul, Aragorn doesn't hesitate. He throws himself between Frodo and death itself, driving back the Black Riders with fire and fury. Later at Helm's Deep, when the men of Rohan are ready to break, Aragorn stands among them. He doesn't just fight. He speaks courage into them. He kneels beside a terrified boy, barely old enough to hold a sword, and tells him,
"Then I shall die as one of them."
In that moment, Aragorn isn't a king, or even a commander. He's a brother in arms. His strength exists not to glorify him, but to steady others. And that's the point. Strength isn't about domination. It isn't about vanity. It isn't about sculpting your body just so people admire you on Instagram. That's strength for the mirror. It's hollow. Aragorn shows us something different. Strength is for service. Strength is for protection. Strength is for carrying those who cannot carry themselves. So here's the question every man should wrestle with. Who are you strong for? If your answer is myself, you've missed the heart of it. Because true masculinity never stops at self. It always flows outward. Aragorn's strength wasn't for Aragorn. It was for the Shire, for Gondor, for Frodo, for every soul who couldn't stand against the shadow. And until you learn to direct your strength toward others, you haven't learned strength at all. After the victory at Pelennor Fields, Aragorn could have done what many men would: ride straight into Minas Tirith, claim the throne, and let the world bow before him. By blood and by right, it was his. But he didn't. Instead, he held back. He knew the city was fragile, the people weary, and that parading himself as king in that moment would only stir division. His mind wasn't on titles, it was on duty. Protect the people, defeat the enemy. That came first. And this reveals something vital. True masculinity isn't obsessed with claiming the crown the moment it's within reach. It's about patience, timing, and responsibility. Aragorn understood that leadership isn't about self-promotion, it's about self-restraint. Now compare this to the culture we live in. Obsession with titles, scrambling for followers, men desperate to be seen as alpha, as if dominance itself defines worth. But chasing crowns doesn't make you a king. Carrying the weight for others does. That's why Aragorn's lesson cuts so deep. Real men don't chase the crown, they carry the weight until it's given. Up to this point, most people saw Aragorn as a warrior, the sword in his hand, the ranger in the shadows, the leader on the battlefield. But then comes a moment that changes everything. The Houses of Healing. Faramir lies stricken, Éowyn broken, Merry fading. No weapon can help them now. And this is where Aragorn shows a side of masculinity that many today call weakness: compassion. With hands steady and voice calm, he heals where others could not. The hands of the king are the hands of a healer. That's how the people come to recognize him. Not by the battles he won, but by the lives he saved. And here's the point: masculinity isn't just about fighting wars, it's about binding wounds. Culture often tells us compassion is soft, unmanly, even dangerous, but Aragorn proves the opposite. The hands that can swing a sword can also heal. The heart that can face death can also give comfort. That isn't weakness, that's completeness. And completeness leads to another lesson, because no man, not even Aragorn, can carry the world alone. Aragorn was never the lone wolf type. Yes, he wandered as a ranger, but when it mattered most, he chose fellowship. He chased Merry and Pippin across endless miles with Legolas and Gimli at his side. He fought shoulder to shoulder with men he'd only just met. And in the darkest hours, he called them not soldiers, not followers, but brothers. That single word matters. Brothers. Because Aragorn understood something our culture often forgets. Real strength isn't forged in isolation. It's born in loyalty, in shared sacrifice, in bonds that make men willing to stand when everything else tells them to fall. Compare that to today's idea of masculinity. The lone wolf ideal. Cut off, isolated, alone. But isolation doesn't make you strong. It makes you brittle. It's brotherhood that forges steel. And Aragorn knew this. He never saw himself above the men of Rohan or Gondor. He placed himself among them. Their fears were his fears. Their fight was his fight. And in the end, it wasn't the crown or the sword that made him their leader. It was the bond of fellowship. Because true masculinity doesn't separate, it unites. Strength is forged in brotherhood, not in isolation. But what happens when that brotherhood faces certain defeat? Most people think courage is about confidence and victory, but Aragorn shows us something harder. Courage when you know you might lose. At the Black Gate, the fate of Middle-earth rests on a gamble. Frodo may or may not succeed in Mordor. Sauron's armies outnumber the West 100 to 1. Any rational man would say retreat, regroup, survive another day. But Aragorn chooses a different path. He leads a vastly outnumbered force to the gates of the Dark Lord himself, knowing full well they may never return. Picture that moment, the dust rising, orc horns blaring across the plains, a sea of enemies pouring from Mordor like a black tide. Behind him, farmers, soldiers, boys from Rohan and Gondor, all exhausted, all terrified, and Aragorn rides forward. His sword is drawn, but more than that, his spirit is unshaken. He looks into the eyes of his men who know they are likely marching to death, and he speaks words that still echo across time.
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. but it is not this day.
That speech isn't bravado. It isn't empty hype. It's a man acknowledging the reality of fear and choosing to act anyway. That's courage. Now compare this to the world we live in. Most of us are paralyzed by the possibility of failure. We won't start a business because we're afraid to lose money. We won't pursue love because we fear rejection. We won't take risks because what if we fail? We live as if masculinity is about controlling outcomes, stacking the deck so we can't lose. But that isn't bravery, that's calculation. Aragorn shows the opposite. Courage isn't about guarantees, it's about sacrifice. It's about standing firm when the outcome is uncertain. It's about being willing to risk everything, not for glory, but for the hope that others might live free. And here's the deeper truth. It's possible to lose and still be a man. You can fail in battle, fail in business, fail in life, and still walk away with honor if you faced it head on. What matters isn't that you never fall. What matters is that you never run. That's why the Black Gate matters so much. Aragorn's defining moment wasn't when he won a battle. It was when he chose to fight one he might lose. His greatness wasn't in victory. His greatness was in his willingness to sacrifice. And that's the kind of courage we're starving for today. Because true strength isn't measured by how much you can take. It's measured by how much you're willing to give up for others. When you step back and look at Aragorn's journey, a pattern emerges. Strength with purpose, power without ego, the warrior and the healer, brotherhood over isolation, courage in the face of defeat. Put those together and you see it. Masculinity was never meant to be about yourself. It's about others. It's about carrying weight so others don't have to. It's about protecting, healing, uniting, and sacrificing, even when no one is watching, even when there's nothing to gain. That's why Aragorn still feels like a breath of fresh air. In a world where men are told either to dominate or to disappear, his example slices through the noise. He reminds us that authentic masculinity doesn't live in extremes. It lives in responsibility. He isn't perfect. He struggles, he doubts, he hesitates. But that's exactly why his example matters. Because real masculinity isn't flawless, it's faithful. And that's the version of manhood we've forgotten. The version we desperately need back. So here's the challenge. If more men lived like Aragorn, what would our world look like? Stronger families, safer communities, leaders who serve instead of exploit? Imagine the difference. Now it's your turn. What do you think masculinity should look like today? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit subscribe, because next time we're diving into another character who reveals a side of strength most people never talk about. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.